Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the CODEC Show, episode number 18, spring 2018. I want to thank you guys for all coming. We have a studio audience. Studio audience, can you give yourselves an applause? My name is Peter James. I'm an associate professor of business and entrepreneurship here on campus. Coming to you from the beautiful campus of the College of DuPage, located here in Glen Ellen, Illinois. We have some great stuff going on campus this spring semester. I don't even have time to talk about it all. It's so exciting as well, but I definitely want to put a plug in for the business, marketing, and management discipline and all my counterparts who teach in that discipline, because I would be remiss if I didn't talk about that as well. So again, thank you all for coming. Those of you who are watching behind the camera, please tell your friends, share it, like us. Do you like on YouTube? Is that what you do? Do you like on YouTube? No, you don't like on YouTube. What do? You just click thumbs up. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube if you could as well. At CODEC, the College of DuPage Entrepreneurship Club, our goal is to expose students and local community members to entrepreneurs and small business owners. By them sharing their story, we'll show how entrepreneurship is definitely an option when your education is complete. And here on campus, of course, we're bringing in entrepreneurs from the local community, from the Chicagoland area, and sharing those journeys, those entrepreneurship journeys, with our students. And we're kicking it off nice and heavy today. We have a special guest who was referred by our president. I didn't put a plug in for our president, Will Storm. Will Storm is actually the best president we've ever had, but he doesn't even know that. It's continuing to get better. He's the guy who's setting the bar really, really high as well. But Will has actually referred Mark Adams to be our first guest for 2018. Mark, welcome.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Thank you so much for coming. Say Yes Consulting. Am I saying that correctly?
Everyone else does. It is Say Yes. So I appreciate that.
I like that. You can't say no.
Absolutely.
You need to say yes.
That's true.
So I'm not going to go into that.
It may take a while, but they get there.
I should do a commercial for you for that.
Yeah. That's right.
So again, thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for Will for recommending him to come. Tell us about yourself, if you don't mind us getting it kicked right off. Who are you? Tell us a little bit about your business, your background.
So again, thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here at the CODEC program, and I thank you for all attending. It probably was more so the food than, but again, it's college, so I get that. But my name is Mark Adams. I am the founder and president of Say Yes Consulting. Say Yes Consulting, of course, is a consulting firm mostly steeped in the technology space. And so we've been established as a small business focused on technology services, consulting, strategic business planning, and hardware development. And that's mostly for the entrepreneurial startup, as well as the mid-market space. So these are mostly companies that we work with who are building products that they are looking to launch into the market, both at a consumer level as well as at a business level. Okay. And so, we get down and dirty associated with every aspect of their business, just so we can understand how it is that they are really kind of envisioning that product to go from what we call concept to commercial launch.
I like that. So, wow. You actually said a mouthful, especially you have a consulting firm. That's kind of awesome. I did a little creeping on you online, man.
Okay.
I'm just going to say I did it on LinkedIn and some other stuff. And I noticed you had an engineering background. So I want you to take us back a little bit and share with our students and our audience here, how did you get into all this? What did the path look like?
Yeah, so just a point of clarification, there surely is a difference between engineers that deal in sales and that deal in products versus network engineering, right? So those are the guys that, they generally are characterized by the propeller hats, and they got the pocket protectors, and usually they're in a sub-level flooring with no windows, no doors, and people really don't let them out, right? Until it is that they come up with something that works, and generally they're kind of focused on that. And so my role had really been historically around the sales engineering side, and so all that means is that when you think about a network and the complexities of that network and all of the different paths and all the different equipment and all the different systems, and then ultimately how it is that that information gets to what would be considered an end user. I can take that complexity and really try and simplify it for the purposes of a business owner so that they can understand it, they can familiarize themselves with it, they can have some level of comfortability for it, and then also make a decision on how it is that it would best be integrated to their business. And so I've spent a lot of time working with enterprise companies, corporations, and small businesses in terms of trying to help them from more of a local area network to a wide area network, and then beyond that in terms of corporate businesses, government, and a number of other entities in terms of using technology to solve business problems. And that's really the value associated with what technology is.
So you're, instead of being the business to consumer guy, you're the business to business. You're looking at other corporations. How do you lure them in? How do you market yourself to them to get more businesses to work with you? Initially, and then even now, because I'm sure now it's a lot of referrals, but how did it start out? Tell us about that road, how hard it was.
Yeah, so I'll give you the short entrepreneurial journey. I started, my first job as an entrepreneur came as an inspiration to a 1984 movie starring Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis. And I'm sure many of you probably are racking your brain to figure out what that is. It was called Ghostbusters. Now you're thinking, well, how is that tied in with, business and entrepreneurship? Well, the one thing that I probably could do well because I was required to was cut grass. And so I decided that my brother and I have an older brother, we decided that we were going to start a business. And so effectively, we wanted to know from our neighbors who were they going to call. And so in essence, it was Lawn Busters. And so that was the business that we started. And thankfully enough, it went for a good number of years, actually, through the teenage years. And so once it is that I finished college, and I can talk a little bit about that, but I started in the telecom space. And this was when, and I'm going to get some rollover dies here, when long distance was probably around 25 cents a minute. So you're looking at me and saying, wait, you pay for long distance? That's crazy. What's wrong with you? So, see, I get the last from the older groups. But at the end of the day, we were selling long distance services. We were selling what they called back then dedicated internet service, which today to be high-speed broadband. And calling cards, so you had to find a payphone to use one of those, and that's a whole nother story in and of itself. But the long story short is that when I was working in that area, I learned very fast that the network technologies for a lot of these wired systems were similar to wireless systems. And so over time, as voice became a lesser function, data became more important, the ability to be mobile when using a lot of those technologies became very apparent, not just to businesses, but to consumers as well. And so as a result, I migrated over to the wireless industry from the telecom industry, and it was a pretty easy transition, right? In terms of the fact that it met a demand, and in most businesses, they're always trying to look at how it is that they increase their value, how it is that they stay competitive, and how it is that they can differentiate themselves associated with whatever their offering is to whomever their customers are. So I took a real interesting jump and started at a small company that some of you may remember is called Nextel.
Yeah.
Anybody remember that one? Maybe?
Are they still around?
Yes, no, actually they are not. They live in the hearts of those that work there, but outside of the people at Motorola who invented the technology, they were acquired by a company called Sprint. You probably are familiar with that one if I ask for a raise of hands. So at the end of the day, those types of companies were really leveraging technology in two ways. Voice, as I mentioned before, which is associated with their cell phones, and back then it was flip phones, which were really cool, and those were before they had color on the screens, right? But then once they got down that path, then they moved into smart devices, and now that's, of course, what everyone has. The other side was being able to monetize the value of their network, and the best way that they could do that is to use the data services. Well, data, if you think about it, is important as long as you know where it's coming from and what to do with it, based upon the information that you're being given. And so I was tasked, I was one of 4 guys working for Sprint at the time. I was tasked with trying to build a model that would allow us to sell our data services to customers in unique ways. And so I'd go around the country talking about how it is that you can leverage data services. And of course, my territory just happened to be where I live, so I handled about 9 states here in the Midwest and
Nice.
some peripheral areas. And so my first customer was a company called Incredible Technologies. Does anybody know who that is? No? Okay, so let me ask a different question. Anybody know who Play Mechanics is? That's another business. Anybody? No? All right, well, I'll give you one more. Stern Pinball. Okay, so historically, you'll not know this, but pinball was first invented in Illinois. Gary Stern is the very first individual that created the pinball machine. His store originally was located in Melrose Park, Illinois.
Wow.
He and the rest of his workers were the original idealists for what was then called Midway, which was the inventor of a game called Pac-Man. And so as it relates to my story, Play Mechanics is the inventor of Buck Hunter. Okay, now I get the heads going, right? Yeah, there you go. Which is currently headquartered in Glen Ellen. And Incredible Technologies is the inventor and maker of Golden Tee Golf. So, exactly. So, again, familiarity, kind of breeds popularity. And so my goal in terms of talking to those companies was basically to take them out of the environment that they were in, because Golden Tee, as an example, they'd have what they call tournament play. So literally you could play golf with multiple people and you can upload your scores, and then as a part of their business model, they would allow individuals to compete for a prize. Wow. In sort of what they considered to be the ultimate tournament, which actually was held in Las Vegas. And similar to the Masters, they don't get a green jacket, they get a leather bomber, right? So they had a whole program associated with that. The problem that they were having is that everything that they connected in terms of sharing that information was done over a landline or a wired connection. So if anybody remembers the old 56K modems, the one that would go, yeah, I'm sure you don't remember those, but at any case.
You do that pretty good.
Yeah, I do,
that.
right? So at any case, the speed of that thing was just molasses slow. Sure. And so as a wireless company, Sprint, in addition to T-Mobile, had models associated with really trying to upgrade these companies. And so taking the electronics that were already existed in those 8-foot cabinets that were coin operated at the time, and then migrating them to a wireless device, which as a fixed product, as long as you got signal and coverage, then you're pretty good. It allowed them to interactive play. It allowed them to upload their scores. It even allowed them to start taking, mag swipe cards, which is ultimately, if you go into any gaming institute nowadays, that's how it is that you pay. There are no more quarters that are really going around. So we were the first, and thus I would be the first to help to migrate the coin-operated industry into wireless technology.
Wow. So now you've taken your knowledge from when you worked with Sprint and taken it over to Say Yes Consulting,
Correct.
Where now you are pretty much doing that with organizations, businesses who want to upgrade their networking, for lack of a better word, to faster speeds, to faster networks. Correct?
Yeah, so it's really about augmenting their products with wireless technology so they can offer more services, so they can be more diverse. So examples of that would be Redbox. So Redbox at one point was a client.
Sure.
And obviously their model was more specific to, how do we get out of the retail environment, right? Because even them at one point were connected, because it's a big computer, right? There's no guy in there handing you your DVDs, right?
Really?
Yeah, exactly. So at the end of the day, it was a migration to wireless.
Sure.
And so that wireless technology was built around cellular connectivity, simply because not only can you operate that in a fixed environment, which at one time it was, but when you cut the cord, now you can establish mobility, right? So whether they were in front of Walgreens or Walmart, or whether you found one of those devices at the Taste of Chicago, they had the ability to connect as long as you had power and they can operate that business from virtually anywhere, which was, of course, the demise of groups like Blockbuster, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Redbox is hurting kind of right now a little bit as well, and the Netflix model is
Yeah.
kind of taken over. Why hasn't Redbox gone into that model, the Netflix, Amazon model with the movies?
Well,
right
you know, the
because I'm sure if I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm sure if I polled right now, who's rented a Redbox movie in the last week? Wow.
Exactly. So, you know, it's an evolutionary process
Sure.
at the end of the day. And so the history of Redbox is that they were originally funded by McDonald's. So many of you probably don't know, but Redbox actually started in McDonald's because the model associated with that organization was, how can we keep the customers in our stores longer, right? So things like the Play Place, things like Redbox, and now, of course, McCafe, all of those elements are driving towards that. In essence, is the same MO,
Sure.
right? And so once it is that you see your market moving and everything is becoming more virtual in terms of streaming, in terms of downloading and those types of things, it's very difficult to compete, right?
Right.
And to my business is to where we rely solely on companies that are building hardware, right?
Yeah.
Because again, software drives a lot, but there are three legs to that stool. There's hardware, there's application, and then there's connectivity. And you have to remember that when it is that you're putting together a solution, because you have to have each of those three legs of the stool in order for it to function, in order for you to be able to monitor it and maintain it, and then ultimately for other people to have access to it. And so that model exists not only in business, it exists here at the college, it exists in most consumer homes, that there's always a piece of equipment, you know, be it the Google product,
Sure,
you
sure.
know, the Alexas, et cetera. There's a piece of equipment, there's application that is driving that, voice activated, connecting through, connecting through the system to be able to capture your voice and then to be able to go through whatever database it needs to, mostly cloud-based, to get the information and send it back to you. And then it's got to be connected. There's got to be Wi-Fi, there's got to be cellular, there's got to be satellite, there's got to be GPS. All of those things are going to work to the common good of that product. So.
Nice. So I only got a couple more questions, but I want to kind of open this up a little bit to our studio audience here as well. Anybody, especially you network gurus out here, anybody got any questions for a networking guy who's in the business right now doing it? Anybody? Joe, yeah, go ahead.
So your business is based off of like technology. You said you're an engineer.
So I play one on TV, but I do not have an electrical engineering degree.
Okay. Do you
So,
like do that or?
but I am certified in certain areas of engineering.
Oh, okay.
Exactly. So, and really, when you think about it, you know, there's two sides to our business. There's understanding the technology, and then there's understanding the business application in terms of how you apply that technology. So you could have a great idea. Like automated vending machines, right? So usually they have some gentleman come out, you know, with the name on his shirt, and you know, if you're out of Doritos, and he'll drive by every week and he'll look, and if they're Doritos, then he'll move on. If they're none, then he'll open it up, fill them, and kind of get on with it. Well, technology allows them to be able to say when that canister's done, then there's a signal that says, hey, I need help, and then it basically phones home, and then Roy or whoever will roll out, and of course he can now justify his gas, his time, how much they're paying him per hour. And so what we try and do as a consultant is to help them to see if they add X to their product or service, it will allow them, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different benefits, right? Not only in terms of reducing their cost, in terms of operating it, but also trying to drive additional revenue streams toward that. So a perfect example is there's a company that's here in Illinois that manufactures safes, basic safes, you know, combination type safes. Well, nothing sexy about that, but ultimately those safes are sold to most retailers, and you think about companies like Subway, you know, they're franchised, they're individually owned, and they have to store their money somewhere, right? So they buy these safes, you know, and the safe has got a little computer image on the front, so it tells you how many deposits you've made. And once you've made enough deposits, then basically you make a phone call to Brinks or Garda or whoever the armored truck folks are, or you walk it to the bank. Well, here's the problem with that, is that if you need to make change as a simple part, right? Or if you need to reconcile so that you can pay your people, you can buy more inventory, those types of things, that's a long process, right? The reconciliation is at a minimum 3 days. Well, what we ultimately did is we helped them to establish what they call a smart safe. And a smart safe basically is the same electronics that they already have it. It's a Windows-based product, by the way.
Sure.
But now it has a wireless device, products like Cisco or Linksys or D-Link, which are basically just simple routers that you add to that device. Yes, it will go inside the safe, but of course you got to bore a hole in it so that the signal can get out, because obviously nothing's going to generate on the inside. And ultimately that will tell them when it is that they have a need to call those companies. So then they can also send that information to the armored car company. They can send their financial information to the banks. The reconciliation process is quicker. Then they can ultimately figure out how much money they actually made in the course of a day. And that is obviously more valuable than just a traditional product that just kind of holds your money, if that makes sense. So again, it's really trying to help them to understand how it is that they'll use technology, why it is that they want to use it, and then what the benefit is on the backside. And so we kind of create a process for them to understand it from a business side, and then once it is that they're convinced on that and move forward, then there's technology that we can implement, and basically that's more of it's managing the project and the process. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
How are you marketing yourself now? How are you advertising?
So when I first started, obviously I was kind of laser focused in the technology space, right? I mean, I had a lot of cool wins, a lot of good products out there, from transportation to finance to healthcare. I mean, everything from wearable devices that are monitoring individuals to ATM machines that, you know, just kind of monitor their current presence, because some of those things actually grow legs, if you can believe that. But at the end of the day, I was really focused in technology. And so what happened is that, as most people know, small businesses are not necessarily based around heavy technology, but they do have products, right, that, you know, provide value. And so as we got more into smaller companies, we found a couple things out. No surprise here. They weren't heavily funded. They had a great business model, right? They had the right people. The market timing was good. And of course, you know, they knew in what area they were going to really drive.
Sure.
Now, of those 5 things, sometimes they had 4 of them, sometimes they had 3, but in essence, they were still in that kind of grassroots level, and they needed to grow. So our goal is to come in and to help them to try and devise what that strategy is associated with going to market, right, from a business side, and then to find the right resources, to look at their business plan, to look at the markets they were going into, and really help them to formulate that in a better way than what they had previously. And so once they did that, then ultimately, whether they were looking for investors, or whether they would do some angel funding, or whether they would incorporate themselves in some of these tech industry incubators that are even here in the Midwest, which I'm sure you folks are probably familiar with, they could go to those organizations and then they could present a solid business plan as opposed to a great idea, right? So, and once that's done, then you'll find that it's a lot smoother to get to the end of, you know, each milestone and to move on with production and commercialization and revenue. So.
Okay. Yeah, you've given us a whole lot of information about you dove into this.
It's an hour and a half show.
But it's good. Actually, this is all good stuff. So a question that I always ask guests, and I finish off usually all interviews with this question here as well. You know, take yourself back to when you were sitting here in college, and if knowing then what you know now, what would you tell your old self as you sat over here in this seat, especially as you've experienced your career, experienced your business now? What would you tell your old self in order to get started, or in order to really develop your path, more or less?
So 2 things that I would say is, one is that I'd have to have a better vision for how it is that I want to move forward. So what that means to you from an application perspective is that if you know what you're good at, and if you don't, then you should inquire with those people that are around you, because ultimately they help you to identify what your brand is anyway. And so know what you're good at, And then ultimately, you want to have some plan associated with how it is that you can apply what you're good at into a service or a business or a product that works, if in fact entrepreneurialism is something for you. The second thing that I would kind of learn is that mentors, wise counsel, and surrounding yourself with other individuals and kind of getting out there, to see different perspectives of not only business owners, but people who are aspiring to do business. That helps you to kind of formulate those areas that you may be a little uneasy about and those things that you really have passion for, because it is a balance of those two. And so the reason why I give you those two things is that I started when I was, beyond the lawn buster thing.
Sure.
When I got into college, I did a bunch of different things. I mean, I went to school in North Carolina, and I graduated with a BA in mass communications, minor in journalism. And so one of my first jobs, I interned with the radio station, right? So I was on the air. How cool is that? To hear my own voice, that was awesome. But at the end of the day, when I got out of college, the only station that would hire me is, as I call it, no experience, no job, right? So NENJ, right? That was the radio station, because there was nothing out there, and in Chicago, it's really hard to get into communications. It's really hard to get into television. So I had to find work. And so I did sales, I did telemarketing, I did collections, I did pretty much every job on the face of the earth, right? And what I was looking for, if I'd had a better vision associated with that, I probably could have applied those things at a faster rate. But ultimately, I found myself into telecommunications, which actually allowed me to expand on the traits that I already have, right? Being a good listener, being an effective communicator, having good rapport with people. Obviously, I'm not shy. So, trying to utilize those things in a service-oriented environment, because the customer is the most important. I don't care what business that you're ultimately going to be in and where it is that you're going to sell and to whom you're going to sell it to. If you're not customer-focused, it will show, and that will impact you, right? Maybe not negatively right off the gate, but over time, as you build the business and build customers, customer relationship is going to be important. That's the key to success.
Good stuff. Let's give Mark a hand here. Thank you so much.
Okay.